Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. Thanks for joining us on Channel 347 on DSTV. Now, the Government of National Unity, we often refer to it as the GNU, in South Africa is taking significant steps to address high poverty levels and the rising cost of living. President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that the GNU plans to expand the range of essential food items exempt from value-added tax, or we commonly call it VAT. We're now joined by Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix, Dr. Azar, Jammine. Good evening, Doctor, and welcome. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Salam alaikum to you and your viewers.
Wa alaikum salam. Thanks very much. Dr. Azar, how do you foresee the expansion of VAT exemptions on essential food items that may and hopefully impact household finances in South Africa?
Clearly, if more foodstuffs were to be exempted from VAT, that would help those who consume those foodstuffs in large measure. Mm-hmm. However, it has been found in the past in some research that in fact the people who benefit most are often higher income earners. Mm-hmm. Especially there's been the whole subject of chicken has come under review, but whilst we know that a lot of poor people consume chicken, so do higher income persons, mm-hmm. and they're the ones who can actually afford to eat chicken more often than the poorer section. So in some senses, the danger here is not that you reduce poverty, but that you just give a further benefit to high income consumers, and then to enable them to eat more chicken. Yeah. But at the same time, you've got to try and recoup the money that is forfeited to the fiscus from that source, and that in turn means raising taxes elsewhere, be it on personal income tax or on other items, or raising the rate of VAT, etc.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Speaking about chicken as well, a large amount of our chicken imported usually comes from Brazil. Do you think that will still be the case, or are we looking to move that industry closer to South Africa?
I think we've been wanting to move that industry closer to South Africa, but there's been a huge tussle between the chicken importers on the one hand and the chicken producers domestically on the other hand. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that issue has been completely resolved. The chicken producers wanting protection and wanting the government to act against cheap chicken imports that they've been accusing the likes of Brazil and the United States of dumping into South Africa. And on the other side, the chicken importers who are saying that's completely over the top, and it's to raise those tariffs on those imports will simply raise the cost of chicken, and in so doing raise the overall inflation rate and be to the detriment mm-hmm. of the man in the street. So there are two views on this, and I don't think that the government actually knows exactly which way to turn, because there are two completely conflicting lobbies working in opposite directions here. Mm-hmm.
When we look at the essential items that the president has in mind to reduce and to maybe make exempt from VAT, is there any understanding or idea of what these items would be? Have they gone on a shopping basket by shopping basket basis?
Yes, very much. I think there's been a lot of research into this. Originally, when VAT was introduced about 25 years ago, there was the Margot Commission of Inquiry. I think Michael Katz was very much involved in that. And the conclusion drawn was that South Africa would do far better not to complicate the VAT system, mm-hmm. but to actually add VAT across the board and not to introduce too many exemptions, because it had been found in other advanced economies that tended to become counterproductive. And at the end of the day, one ended up with paying a lot more VAT on a smaller number of items, and it actually didn't help the fiscus. It just complicated matters. Yeah. And I think that conclusion is still very valid. And yet, ever since then, there's been this move to claw back some of the VAT on foodstuffs to help the poor, notwithstanding the fact that in many instances it's the rich that actually benefit most from the exemptions.
Yeah. With the decline of oil prices throughout the world, I mean, if you look at China's economy right now, a large amount of the economy is struggling a little bit because of the drop in oil prices. However, the ordinary South African feels that when the oil prices, drop, or even the transport costs for public transport drop, the food price doesn't really get affected. That always seems to be at a very high level.
That's not entirely true. What I did find, especially last year, was that whenever one did see a big increase in fuel prices, one saw an acceleration in food prices, and conversely, when one saw a decline in fuel prices, food prices didn't rise anywhere near as strongly. What you may be hinting at is, why are food prices not actually reduced?
Correct.
When rather than just kept stable. Correct. When fuel prices are falling, and that in part is a function of the monopolistic nature of the South African economy. Mm-hmm. There are far too few producers and retailers that renders the system quite immune to competitive forces that might otherwise have resulted in businesses being compelled to reduce their prices simply in order to help sell the goods that they're trying to.
For sure. Yeah.
Sell.
If you look at Dr. Azar, in your opinion, from a social economist's perspective, what are the potential economic implications of these initiatives that the GNU would like to implement, especially in terms of reducing poverty and maybe improving the lives of so many South Africans?
I think psychologically, obviously, it would be may provide a bit of a boost to poorer sections of South African society. But in the longer term, I think I don't know that there would really be any benefit. In the final resort, you have to source revenue from somewhere or the other. And if it's not through VAT, then you've got to get that money from other sources, including maybe fuel levies. But again, we're trying to move away from there and try to simplify the fuel pricing exercise in South Africa. And that in turn is a similar situation where you've got to source the revenue elsewhere.
Of course.
And if it means increasing direct taxes in the place of indirect taxes, this will penalize a lot of income earning persons in South Africa and divert the burden of taxation even more onto an even smaller group of persons to fund welfare to the majority of South Africans. Mm-hmm. The real problem really lies with education and the fact that the educational system in South Africa is not producing enough skills, especially technical skills, to enable people coming out of the schooling system to find jobs and to add value in such a way that they are then amenable to finding jobs and increasing their income through that source. And instead, all we're doing is trying to find ways of subsidizing people who don't have jobs or earn very little, rather than moving to educate them and empower them with the ability to earn more.
Yeah, I think that's a large amount and a very important topic that you touched on as well, because as we've got the kids leaving school right now, but not much opportunities being provided to them, which means exacerbating the unemployment rate. And I think one of the ministers touched on that in their debates, where they would like to provide more opportunities, not only for the younger individual, but we also see the more senior individuals that's been affected and still recovering from the likes of COVID and the ripple effect that it's had, from that point of view as well. Do you find that we need to increase and provide more opportunity for, the over 35, 40 crowd?
I think the over 530, 40 crowd is actually doing relatively well compared with the younger people who are just not finding any opportunity. In fact, the trade unions, there's a criticism of them that they're looking after the 35 plus cohort of workers rather than, and this is why they keep pressing for things such as higher minimum wages and economic empowerment regulations,
right,
in order to protect the jobs of the unionists, rather than creating an opportunity for younger people in their 20s to find jobs more easily. Okay. This is a huge debate in South Africa that has been ongoing and will continue to be in the mainstream of debate going forward.
Absolutely. We're chatting to Dr. Azar Jammine, who's the Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we continue our discussion. We're going to open up the WhatsApp line. If you'd like to be part of the show, let us know your thoughts with regards to the GNU and President Cyril Ramaphosa announcing that the GNU plans to expand the range of essential food items exempt from value-added tax. Thanks for watching us on Channel 347. We'll be back just after the break. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. Thanks for watching us on Channel 347. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa recently announced that the GNU plans to expand the range of essential food items exempt from VAT. We'd like to know your opinion. We have an economist on the Zoom link up, but we would like to hear from you, our viewer, on the WhatsApp line, 079 085 2511. WhatsApps only, no telephone calls, unfortunately. 079 085 2511. Let us know your thoughts about what affects you in your household, in your community, in your business, and what the GNU should maybe prioritize going forward. On the Zoom link up, we have Dr. Azar Jammine, who is the Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix. Dr. Azar, thanks once again for joining us. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, and nice to be with you.
You're welcome. Dr. Azar, when we look at the plans going forward, and we've heard the delivery from various ministers, largely around the socio-economic stance in South Africa and how our communities could maybe live a better life as well. Cutting the essential food items and making them exempt, increasing that food basket from VAT is a definite step in the right direction. But in your opinion, what should the GNU prioritize? What should they be looking at right now?
As I alluded to you in the earlier section, education is critical, and I don't know that enough is being focused on by the GNU to try and improve education. The second very important thing is how do you really create jobs? You create jobs through investment in productive processes. And South Africa's investment trends have been extremely weak over the past decade and a half. State capture has had a lot to do with that, because the state-owned enterprises have been used as a key vehicle through which to effect state capture, resources that ought to have been devoted to improving infrastructure and the ability of SOEs to maintain critical operations in the country have instead been siphoned off to closely connected individuals to the politicians involved. Now, the GNU, hopefully, being a government of national unity and comprising 10 political parties, will exert far more oversight over the potential state capture, and that will free up a lot of resources that could be invested. The second aspect is why have they not been invested in the past, outside of the issue of whether there's not been enough money or not. And here, crime and sabotage have been very critical. in impeding investment. Many of you will have heard about the so-called construction mafia.
Yeah.
And there are mafias all over the place, little syndicates that try and corner markets for investment for their own benefit, and that in so doing actually impair the ability to invest. And the country's share of investment to GDP has fallen from 24% in 2008 and 19% in 2014 to it recovered a little from 13 to 15% after COVID, but it's been falling back again more recently. Mm-hmm. And the most obvious area where investment needs to take place is in respect of expanding the electricity grid in order to enable the country to transmit electricity more, especially from new renewable energy projects, more easily. And secondly, to improve the transport system, to upgrade the rail network, yes, and reverse the debilitating trend that we have seen over many years of ever more use of road transport at the expense of rail, when we actually had a very decent rail network in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I think it gives us large insight into, what the focus should be as well. Speaking about Eskom as well, they've managed to keep the lights on for over 100 days, and I think it's a huge accomplishment. But now, in a recent story, we've got Zambia who's looking to, tap into our grid and borrow, I think about 218 megawatts, because they've been hit with quite a big amount of load shedding, up to 16 hours a day, that they've been going through from Zimbabwe and from us in South Africa. Is that going to put an extra strain on our grid?
I don't think the magnitude of the electricity demands from a country like Zambia will really have a huge impact on South Africa. The size of their economy is minute compared with that of South Africa. Mm-hmm. And even if it does exert more pressure on South Africa, there are hopes that South Africa's electricity generation will be expedited through a whole lot of investment in renewable energy projects. The other side of the coin is that there has been massive expansion of investment into solar panels, yes, in South Africa, and this has reduced the domestic demand for electricity and removed a lot of the pressure of supply relative to demand, and that is one of the other big reasons why we've ended up with less load shedding. Mm-hmm. The third factor is that the electricity ministry was basically siphoned off into a ministry on its own, away from public enterprises on the one hand and Department of Mineral and Energy Affairs on the other hand, and that has seen far more effective and coordinated and cohesive management improvements in the likes of Eskom, I think, mm-hmm, that have enabled the maintenance work in that utility to be improved, and in so doing to reduce the level of outages, unplanned outages that contributed towards the load shedding.
Yeah, we've recently had a delegation visit the US and, sort of cement the ties with the AGOA agreement. And that was quite a fruitful meeting that they've just had. Should we be doing more of that? Should our minister be cementing more of the international trade so that we can benefit from it?
Without a doubt, I have found it a very encouraging initiative on the part of Minister Tau, and that in some respects differentiates him from his predecessor who failed, who was ideologically antagonistic towards anything Western. And so, yes, I think this is a constructive move, and I think we should see more of it. Having said that, AGOA itself is not the be-all and end-all. Yeah. The trade and the trade benefits from AGOA are substantial, but I mean, the country can exist without the economy can exist without them. But it's the important messaging that comes from an improvement in relations between South Africa and the United States that would encourage investment in all sorts of other areas. Already we've seen, for example, the rand strengthening, long-term interest rates declining because of a willingness on the part of investors abroad, especially American investors, to buy up our bonds now that we've got a new government of national unity that they see as being conducive to a very democratic society that they like, and increased cooperation and international relations of the kind that we've been seeing through the Ministry of Trade and Industry, in tandem with private sector leaders, by the way.
Of course.
And that sent another important message that the new government is far more amenable to share its efforts with the private sector rather than for government to be a command economy.
Of course.
But totally controlled by, with total control in its hands rather than embracing the private sector.
Of course, the opposition has hit back and said that, we should be looking at more the BRICS countries to, increase our investment and cement our agreements with them as well. But we'll follow that in the next couple of weeks. To end off, I just want to touch on, we've just, released the population statistics. Surely that will now give us a bigger impact, give the GNU a bigger impact in terms of their planning and how to plan better going forward.
It ought to do so. What it shows is that the country's population is growing at 1.33% per annum, so that any GDP growth rate below that means that people are getting poorer. But there are some dramatic demographic changes taking place. In particular, the decline of the white population relative to other race groups in the country. And I don't think it's fully recognized that at the moment, there are almost as many whites as there are Black Africans over the age of 80 in the country. And yet, when you get to those below the age of 5, there are more Black African babies under the age of 5 than there are whites in total in the country. There are 3 white children for every 100 Black African children under the age of 5. This tells you that the white population is going to die off quite inevitably in coming years to come, and and so you're going to get a dramatic shift in the distribution of the population. South Africa is going to become a predominantly Black African country in due course, and that throws all sorts of questions into policy making, positive and negative. And I don't think this demographic change that is taking place is fully recognized either by the population at large or by businessmen or politicians or labor for that matter.
Brilliant. Dr. Azar, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for affording us your time. We really look forward to linking up with you in the near future. Have a great weekend.
And the same to your listeners.
Thanks very much. Wa alaikum salam. Thanks very much. That is Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix, Dr. Azar Jammine, who is graciously given off his time and given us valuable information around Cyril Ramaphosa's announcement that the GNU plans to expand the range of essential food items exempt from value-added tax. That's all that we have for you from the Cape Town team. Do join us on Monday as we bring you another edition of Hilaal Live. From the Cape Town team, Sohail Barnes, Mohammed Parker and myself, Luqman Shadrack. Have a great evening. Assalamu alaikum.